Elizabeth Taylor was born in London, England on the 27th of February 1932. Her parents were American art dealers. When Elizabeth was 7, the family moved to Los Angeles to try and avoid World War II. A family friend saw Elizabeth and suggested that she be taken for a screen test, and she was then signed to Universal Pictures. She first appeared on screen in There's One Born Every Minute in 1942. After that film, Universal dropped her contract, but she was soon picked up again by Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. Her first film with that studio was Lassie Come Home in 1943, after which they signed her for a year.
Priscilla!
In 1944, she starred in National Velvet, which was a massive hit, grossing over $4 million and making 12-year-old Elizabeth a big star. She was then given a long-term contract with Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer and was the studio's biggest child star at the time. In 1947, she starred in Life with Father, which was one of the studio's biggest films that year, and in 1949 she was in Little Women, which was also a huge success.
Amy, I've told you 1,000 times till the end of Act 5 you haven't the slightest idea who you are.
Well, does Meg know?
Of course I do.
Well, then I want to know, too. Why should I always be so ignorant?
Throughout the 50s, she continued to star in film after film, most of them successful. When she was 17, she married Nicky Hilton, the son of Conrad Hilton, who was the founder of Hilton Hotels. They divorced a year later, and in 1952 she married again, this time to Michael Wilding. During their 5 years together, Elizabeth gave birth to 2 sons, Michael Jr. and Christopher. In 1956, she co-starred in the hit Giant with James Dean. 2 years later, she starred in the film adaptation of Tennessee Williams' Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, which was another huge success. In 1957, a month after she divorced Michael Wilding, she remarried to Mike Todd. They had a daughter, Lisa, together. In 1958, she was widowed when Mike tragically died in a plane crash. After his death, Elizabeth became involved with Eddie Fisher, who was a close friend of Mike Todd. In 1959, Eddie left his wife and married Elizabeth. After her role in the successful film Butterfield 8, released in 1960, Elizabeth earned her first Oscar. In 1964, after getting another divorce, Elizabeth married again. She met her new husband, Richard Burton, on the set of Cleopatra, which was released the year before, in 1963.
Now, you may have the treaty you asked for, on the following conditions. By your authority as Proconsul of Rome, you will cede to Egypt immediately the following territories: Judea, Jordan, Armenia, Phoenicia, the provinces of Sinai and Arabia, the islands of Cyprus and Crete.
You asked for 1/3 of the Roman Empire.
Cleopatra was the most expensive film ever made at the time. It took years to make, and while it almost pushed 20th Century Fox to bankruptcy, it was still the biggest film of the year. Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton appeared on screen together again in The VIPs in 1963, and again 2 years later in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, a film that earned Elizabeth her second Oscar. In 1967, she and Burton co-starred in another film, The Taming of the Shrew. Throughout the late 60s and 70s, she was in many more films, most of which were unfortunately box office failures. She divorced Richard Burton in 1974, remarried him in 1975, and then divorced him again in 1976. She had one daughter, Maria, while she was with Richard Burton. In 1976, she married the former U.S. Secretary of the Navy, John Warner. They stayed together for 6 years until a divorce in 1982. In 1991, she got married for the 8th and final time to Larry Fortinsky. They met in a rehab and remained married for 5 years. In 1991, she set up the Elizabeth Taylor HIV/AIDS Foundation after her close friend Rock Hudson died from AIDS. She began struggling with her health, and in 2009 she underwent successful heart surgery. In 2011 she began experiencing heart problems again and died on the 23rd of March 2011 from cognitive heart failure.